Right, hello everyone, good afternoon, welcome to the Gateway Workshop for Researchers. Just a few housekeeping bits and bobs to begin with. My name's Rosie Wakeham, I am the Head of Training at HDR UK, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome you to the workshop. So first of all, just to let you all know that the webinar will be being recorded. I will introduce our speakers in a moment, and before I do, just be aware that at the end of each of their talks, there'll be 5 minutes or so for questions. So please, if you do have any questions during the talks, just submit those questions during the chat using the question and answer function in the webinar. Our speakers today are Sushil Varma, our Director of Engineering HDR UK, Alison Elderfield, Data Strategy Manager, and Varsha Kodja, who's the Data and Connectivity Project Manager. So without further ado, I will introduce Sushil, who'll be doing our first talk of the afternoon. Take it away, Sushil.
Thanks, Rosie. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just quickly share my screen. Hopefully you can see that. Click share. So as Rosie mentioned, this is kind of a 4-part presentation just to give you an overview about the gateway, the data access request, the metadata work, and where are we going with the gateway, and also ask for help, really, because we need researchers to have, start using the gateway, but also contribute to improve the content and contribute to the development of the gateway. So I've been speaking about the gateway. I'll just give you a very quick slides. Again, I'll just whistle-stop tour of the gateway, and we can dive into the details. Alison and Varsha will be able to dive into some of the details, and I'll also try and give you a demo at the end. So Health Data Gateway was set up, I think, about 2 years ago now, but we started building it in anger during the pandemic. So when we started, we had about 17 data sets. Now we have over 700. And it's essentially a metadata catalog or a registry of health data research content that's available from all 4 nations in the UK. And by health data content, it's secondary use, data sets for secondary use, tools, papers, projects, educational courses, and everything else as well that's available. So educational courses was initially stored on the gateway. Now we have a fantastic resource called HDR UK Futures, which the training team will be telling you more about in later talks. So the fundamental purpose of the gateway is to make things fair. You might have heard the word used very often. So making things findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So everything is indexed within the gateway and findable and accessible via the gateway. You can search for data sets. You can search for high-level metadata. You can also go into some of the data sets into the technical metadata. So at the field level, you can see what data types is being used, what variables are being collected, what tables are available. And you can also look at frequency distributions and also go deeper into cohort discovery, being able to do multi-phenotypic characteristic searches as well. But once you've found the data set that you're looking for from the data custodian you want to get access to, we also help support and facilitate communications with the data custodian. You can have initial inquiries with the data custodian and have some messages back and forth, but you also help you streamline your data access request and submit them via the gateway to multiple data custodians as well. And at the end of your process, after you've done your research, we'd encourage you to upload papers and tools so we can link that all back to the datasets to help the rest of the community build upon your great work as well. So the gateway is set up under the UK Health Data Research Alliance, which is a membership organization of about more than 60 organizations now, who collect and curate data sets, tools, papers, and other resources onto the gateway so that it's findable, accessible, interoperable, and usable. And a lot of the work is around standards, metadata harmonization, using making data research ready for researchers such as yourselves. So some of the data sets we have, so now we have about 700 data sets, as I said, and it comes from all 4 nations, from all 4 dimensions of data sets. We go all the way from primary care, secondary care, tertiary care, all the way up to palliative care, research cohorts as well, genomic data sets as part of the COVID-19 pandemic as well. And I won't spend too much time on this because Alison will be giving you a deep dive about this, but as I said, we can give you quality scores of the metadata and also a data utility score of how useful the data set is. We also have Cohort Discovery. So as I mentioned, rather than just searching for metadata, you can actually query the data set itself to find how many patients there are matching your particular query. And I'll do a very quick demo about it as well. So once you have found the data set you're looking for, what we've done, worked with the Alliance, is to streamline some of the access request process. Again, I won't spend too much time here, and I'll let Varsha speak a little bit more about this and how to think and how to approach this problem. The other piece of work, which again, we talked about findable and accessibility, interoperable and reusable, is much more around how you make these data sets available in a federated network across the UK. So much of the work is around standardization and harmonization as to what are the kind of capabilities you would want to see within a trusted research environment. A trusted research environment is a data center which holds secure data. So how do you get access to it? So identity management, how do you run analytics in a federated or remote way, or even spinning up Jupyter notebooks or Spark clusters? How do you move data if needed, and also metadata across your different environments? And how do you scale out from a single trusted research environment to access multiple data sets from multiple trusted research environments for your needs? So again, it's a lot of layers of interoperability that we're sort of building up. So how do you get data pipelines into trusted research environments? How do you secure them? How do you make that safe for researchers to use? How do you interoperate that across the wider network where you have data sets and resources that needs to be pulled together for your research analysis, but also engaging with researchers and other stakeholders across the ecosystem to understand what are the kinds of capabilities they would like to do. So these 3 layers are being continuously evolved based on your feedback, and the gateway just represents the front door to this wider ecosystem. So once you're able to do this, and we've seen this during the pandemic, is you can create flywheel effects. Once you make data sets discoverable for public benefits, you can improve and link the data, make it fair, apply novel data governance approaches, make data and research trustworthy, undertake your analysis in a safe, trusted research environment, and produce reproducible results. That is the true personification of fair, in our opinion, and this joining of the dots creates flywheel effects that you can replicate and learn from and apply to other domains as well. So with that, I will stop, but I'll just quickly jump into a demo for 5 minutes just to give you an idea about fair and the gateway. So I'll just share my screen. Hopefully you can see that. So this is what the health data research gateway looks like at the moment. So when you come in, you can see the number of assets that's available. You can browse different collections. So these are all collections curated by our community. You can see what's new and get helpful advice on various aspects. You can search for things. I'm just going to go COVID-19 symptom tracker data set as an example. So that's, oh, sorry, I didn't hit enter. You can see COVID-19 symptom tracker. You can search for COVID-19 as well, I suppose. You can look at the data set and see all the metadata around it. You can see the technical details as well. Now, if I go back one step, you can also filter based on phenotypes, on keywords, and publishers, and so on. So the typical search engine type capabilities. The one last thing I wanted to demo before I hand off to Alison is the advanced search capability. So one of the advanced searches, and there's another advanced search that Alison will mention in a minute, is the Cohort Discovery service. So it gives you a pop-up window to say, these are 2 types of advanced searches, and click on advanced search. Now this presents you with a slightly different interface because it goes deeper into the technical metadata. Now, if I wanted to search for some characteristic, let's say I want to search for asthma and somebody being overweight, for example, I'm picking here. So these are all phenotypic characteristics. So these all have associated ICD-10 codes, OMOP codes, and it's curated in the phenotype library, which is also a piece of work that we're doing with the community under HDA UK. And these are all mapped into OMOP. So if I want to search this, I'm hitting running. I'm looking for how many patients there are in the entire network who have comorbidities of asthma and have a overweight measurement. Now this is running. This sends the query off into the network. All of the queries are executed against those databases, and only the counts of those patients are returned back. So this will take some time. Hopefully it'll finish in a few seconds. Yeah, there we go. And you can see you've got 128 patients. So if I want to say, okay, I want to find, so let's say I'm looking for me, I'm going to drag in alopecia, so baldness, and I run the query. Now this will fail. It's not because it'll fail, it's because you have statistical disclosure controls built into the system. So any results below 50, it's not returned, even though I know I'm in one of these data sets that's been collected. So, but what's the point of this? Once you've found those numbers, for example, you can go into the results that you previously did. So I'm going to find that one that I just did before. You can see these are the data sets that was queried. 128 came from the ALSPAC data set, and I can click on that and I can get to the data set with the knowledge that there are 128 patients that match that query, and I can go and access it. When you look at metadata in general, you might be able to say that those are the right characteristics, but do they actually have the numbers in terms of your power law calculation to be able to work out, should I access? There's no point in requesting access to data which has just one, maybe two patients in that. So with that, I'll stop speaking and hand off, and I'm happy to take questions.
Yes, Sushil, there is one question in the Q&A, which is, does the gateway provide information on how to request access to datasets or contact the data custodian? If so, could we also see a demo? Thanks.
Emil, that's a great question. I will let Varsha answer that as part of her talk, because she will go into details of that and will answer that live as part of her talk. The other question, as you can see in the chat, is from Shirin Elizabeth. Is around how much missing data there is in accuracy. That's a great question. It's varied, that's the truth. Some data custodians have a huge amount of variability. So for example, a data set like HES from NHS Digital, which is the health episode statistics data set, it's vast, it's massive, it's about 55 million patients, and every single visit that you would have in the hospital, there's a huge amount of inaccuracies and discontinuities in the data, and we're working with the data custodians to improve that. And one of the things that we're bringing into the gateway is to actually capture that information and make that available as part of our technical profile information. For every table that's there, we will tell you how many fields are missing in that data set, what are the frequency numbers of the values in it, not the actual values itself, of course, and also what kind of vocabularies are being used as part of that data set. That's all being undertaken as part of the work for Cohort Discovery and also for the National Core Studies work as well. But the truth is, it depends on data custodian, and even within a data custodian, it depends on the type of data collection being used. If it's usually a third-party data collection, that's harder to manage because you have to influence the suppliers of that data to improve the way they collect the data. But yeah, it's sort of a hit and miss, is the honest answer. Any other questions? Okay, I think we can also answer further questions as we go deeper into the presentations and later on in the talk as well. So with that, I'll hand you over to Alison, who's going to talk about metadata.
Hi, thank you so much, Sushil. That was well presented. I'm just working off one screen today, so I'm just going to start sharing mine now. There, I apologise. Okay, can everybody see that okay? I'll take silence as a yes, because I can't see anyone else. Okay, so my name's Alison and I'm a data strategy manager, and I actually lead the data improvement team here at HDR UK. And we tend to work to improving the quality of data. We are responsible at the moment for improving the process of metadata onboarding. We use the data utility framework, and we also are interested in advanced searches and generally trying to make the gateway and the data sets much more useful for researchers. We're working on ensuring that researchers are able to access the right data sets for them. So that's what we're doing at the moment, and this is what I do. So I'm just going to take you through some of my slides. Okay, so in terms of the metadata, so as Sushil has shown, and when we often show demonstrations of the gateway, this is the information that you can see that is, it shows you a rating of metadata. So this particular one was published by HQIP, and it's a vascular registry audit data set. This shows you the technical details, and it's able to show you extra detail to do with the metadata that would be useful for you when you're looking to see if this particular audit data would be the right data set to be looking into. So when we're using the metadata on the gateway, I'm not giving a demonstration, I'm just sort of showing you how you would find it. You can actually search based on quality of data, when it was uploaded. You can search along all different all different search functions. So you'll see actually here we have publisher down the side, and there's a whole list of, in this particular one, ones that were published by HQIP. When you look into the data set, you can see all the information, the description, and along the technical details. And so the description will also include things like provenance and coverage. The data utility is something that we're particularly interested in, because this tells us the usefulness of the data, and it gives us the extra information behind the metadata. So this particular data set, you'll notice, has a gold metadata rating, as a score of 88. So the way we score the quality of metadata is based on the number of completed percentage, the number of completed fields, which gives a percentage score. The value of the completed fields, which is an error score against the schema. And if it's documented in GitHub, we use GitHub a lot, that's where we keep our schema. That is a good reference point for us. All that information is documented in GitHub. So this particular data set is showing an 89 weighted completeness, 89% weighted completeness with an 11% weighted error, which is it's quite good, and it's good enough to get a gold metadata rating. I will explain the ratings in a bit more detail in just a second. So Sushil alluded to this earlier, actually. One of the things that we are very much interested in is the data utility framework. This was developed a few years ago, HDI UK, and we use this data utility framework to articulate the potential usefulness of data sets for specific purposes. It's really to support the users of data to find the right data sets to meet their requirements. It provides an evidence base for identifying specific areas of activity for improvement. So we use it, for instance, when we look at data sets that have been put onto the gateway, particularly by our hubs, and we look to see where the data sets where we can advise on improving the quality of those data sets that have recently gone onto the gateway. So we do help our hubs and custodians to improve the quality of their data by making reference to the data utility framework. This data utility framework was developed in consultation with our custodians from a range of sectors, and also using surveys, and also we a number of years ago, publish a green paper consultation. We use that as a process in order to get this right, but it is in constant improvement and development, because these things can always be improved. So as I said, we actually started to do this by using 31 survey responses, 21 interviews, and more than 40 data sets in order to test this framework and develop it. The data utility framework has 5 categories, and it's separated, that's not even a word, separated across a range of dimensions. And these are qualitatively evaluated to describe the characteristics of a data set. So we would be looking at using the medallion system from bronze to platinum in order to be able to rate the quality of the data. We're very clear in our communications with custodians that it's not always about achieving a platinum, as the medallion would actually suggest, but instead it's really a rating to allow the researchers to exclude data sets that might not meet the specific threshold based on their needs. There are some categories that you are unable to achieve a platinum just because, for instance, some of the COVID data sets, they've not been around that long. So they can't achieve a platinum rating across all of the dimensions. So it's just, that's just some of it is impossible to achieve the absolute maximum platinum rating. It is beneficial because data custodians and processors can communicate the utility of their data set, and often we find that this is communicated if organizations want to make applications for funding, for instance. So it is good because it allows you to rate your own quality of data, and it provides a benchmark for best practice as well. Been talking about, and actually probably should have showed this a bit earlier so that you could visualize what I was talking about. Having said that, this is just a zoom in on one category, which is data documentation. And it just goes to show that the category is data documentation, but it's split into dimensions. There's definition, and then across from here, you can see what you would need to obtain to get the different medallion ratings. And we were very fortunate because we did actually publish some of this in the BMJ earlier, and I can send that link around so that you'd be able to look at that. But we did publish sort of our early uses and the way that we developed the data utility framework. But we are actually developing it further in the data improvement team. So, for instance, then a researcher from a pharmaceutical company searching for a data set, and they want to understand the long-term outcomes of a treatment. So you'd look to see if the data can be used by researchers from a commercial sector. So you'd look to see if there was gold. And then can this data be linked? For instance, in medicines, does it include medicines? And is it long-term data? And this is precisely what I meant by COVID data, not being able to achieve a platinum rating. And whether there's high provenance to support regulation and HTA discussions, so provenance gold. Again, you can't see this so much, but it is something I just wanted to show because it does show the different categories. So the data documentation, the technical quality, the coverage, the access and provision, and the value and interest. And when you open up on the gateway, when you access a data set, you are able to cascade this. So you can actually see the elements of the data utility work and how, you know, a data set isn't just going to be completely gold, it's going to be split across the documentation, the technical quality, and it will achieve different ratings across the different categories and dimensions. So Sushil helpfully started talking about advanced searches. So I just wanted to talk to you about the Data Utility Wizard. The Data Utility Wizard is really good for being able to find use a much more accurate search based on the ratings of the data quality. I'm not going to show a demo, but the way that you would access it is through this advanced search function underneath the search here, and then you would select Data Utility Wizard, and this is the next page that you would see. So you're able to no, sorry, this isn't the next page you see. You have to answer loads of questions that the Data Utility Wizard will pose to you, and it will then apply all sorts of different filters. So you can see here, I'm very sorry about the size of this. On this particular search, I selected, yes, I wanted it to be academic research. I wanted to use real-time data, and I wanted it to be between, updated between 1 and 6 months. And I just added so many more. I accepted so many more categories. So, for instance, is the dataset source documented? And then when I hit search, I did have a list of 22 results that came up with including all of this information, and that enabled me to be able to find what I was looking for. But you can also tell it what you don't want to be looking for as well, which is also quite helpful. The process of elimination is often very helpful. And that's all my questions. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop screen sharing because I can't see anything. Let's have a look. I'm just having a look at the questions. So I mentioned HTA relevant has these ratings. So actually, you asked me about whether so you said that I mentioned the HTA that it's HTA relevant, and have HRA and NICE recognize these ratings, and have they been consulted? I know that NICE, when NICE, at the moment I am consulting NICE about the data utility framework, and I'm in discussion with them about how to improve it, because they're doing some work on an assessment framework as well. So I am currently in discussions with them. I don't currently know about the HTA relevant, and the reason being is because I wasn't here at the very start when this was developed. So I'd need to go away and find out. I'm very sorry, I can't answer that right now. I'm not sure if Sushil would know. Sushil may know about that answer, but maybe not.
Yes, so they were consulted, but it's not recognized because we don't have a critical mass of uptake yet. So we are only covering about 60. At the point when we sort of developed this, we had about 60 data custodians. So one of the feedback we got was, let's get this over, a critical mass of data custodians, and then we can revisit that. And also harmonize and standardize this as part of the British Standards Institute. So do some of that legwork first before they can recognize this as a gold standard, or that they can recommend. And also talking to the funders as well, so we can get the funders to recognize this to improve the quality of the metadata. But that's an ongoing process. But they were definitely consulted in the beginning.
Thank you, Sushil. I knew you would know. Rosie, is there any other questions that you think are relevant for me to be answering? That's fine.
There's the one question I can see in the chat, which is, what are the rough breakdowns of medallions in the system currently? Or was that already addressed by Sushil? Sorry if it was. Yes, I think it was actually in the chat.
And I think there's one more around how we motivating data controllers to achieve gold ratings. Well, we're not actually getting them to achieve gold ratings. We want them to get to platinum. But I think Alison will be able to tell you more.
Thank you. Yes, so we are we're doing quite a lot of work in the data improvement team around our processes. And a lot of this comes from the work that we do with hubs actually as well, because we do actively engage with the hubs as part of the way that the hubs were set up. So we do feedback, and we do feedback some information and just some help as to what we would expect to receive, say if you were on a bronze and you wanted to move to silver, and then silver to gold, etc., etc. So we do provide that support, but one of the things that we are trying to do is work with custodians on the feedback loop to see how we can be helping custodians much more and what they need from us. And we're always happy to review the data and feed in. One of the things that we do is actually, for those that want it, is we do talk to custodians on a regular basis, often most of the custodians like once a month. But as part of those meetings, the data improvement team, we do talk about their data and the quality of data, and we do sort of give some helpful tips. But we are working on that process with the Alliance team to be able to make that a much more sort of feedback loop, so that we can eventually improve all of the quality of the all the quality of all the data sets on the gateway. That might be impossible, but it's definitely an ultimate aim that we have. Okay, is there anything else, or I'm happy to pass on? Okay.
Thanks, Alison.
Okay.
I think can pass over to Varsha now.
Thank you.
Hi, okay, so hopefully everyone can see me, hear me, and see my screen. I'm going to take silence as a yes.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, thank you. So I'm going to just take everyone through the data access request module part of the gateway. So I will be, let me just get this. So I'll be talking about how to access the data sets that you need, giving you all a quick overview of the principles behind the DAR form that we use, the 5 safes model, which you may or may not be familiar with, how to use the DAR module within the gateway, and then just unpick a little bit about what happens after you've submitted the DAR and what you can expect after your DAR has been approved, assuming your data access request is approved. So just to take everyone through kind of the overall process. And you can think of it in 3 parts. There's an informal inquiry part, then there's the formal application and potentially legal contracting should the data access request be approved. And then you've got the aspect of thinking about data access and the sharing of outcomes from that. So the first thing you need to do is go to the gateway, identify the data sets that you're interested in, and then send an informal inquiry to the data custodians. They will get back to you and they may have some queries for you. The judgment they need to make is it suitable? Is it relevant for this inquiry to proceed to a full data access request? Or is there some other way we can serve the needs of this particular researcher? So that's the thing that they're looking for. If it's decided that you do need to move to the next part, which is the formal data access request, you then do that via the gateway, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. And then that data access request will be assessed by the custodian. They may have some more feedback for you and send this back to you for more information, or they may say, once you've got to the point where they've got sufficient information to then convene a data access governance committee, who will then look at your application and assess it. And again, they may have queries, the custodian may have additional queries. Assuming all is well, they may well ask you to then complete any legal documentation. So it may be a formal data sharing agreement, for example, some legal documentation on who the data processor is going to be, how the data is going to be controlled, etc. And then once you have access, your data access request has been agreed and approved, you'll then be given access to that data, usually within some kind of safe setting, like a trusted research environment. And then you'll be asked to think about how the results of your project are going to be shared as well. Some data custodians may want to look at the results of your analysis to make sure there's nothing sensitive in that before you can share more widely, but all of this usually will happen and take place within that trusted research environment. So in that initial inquiry, what's actually asked of you? And it's quite simple. Again, there's 3 main buckets you can think of. It's, tell me who you are, Tell us about your study, and then tell us about the data sets you want to access, which data sets you want to access. You can apply to access more than one data set from the same custodian using the current functionality. We're building functionality to enable in the future researchers to access multiple data sets held by multiple custodians via just completing a single form. They'll need to know if you're planning to combine any data sets. I'm sure you're all aware of potentially the issues around linking data sets and thinking about confidentiality of the participants. So this is the information they'll need. And then any particular variables you might want to access. Some data custodians may well have functionality to allow you to access parts of the data. You only need to access the parts relevant for your study. There may be other parts which you don't need to access. Again, just thinking about protecting that confidentiality of the parts of the study. So I just wonder, I don't know how many people are familiar with the 5 Safes framework. Normally I would have done a hand up thing here, but I don't know how to do that on Zoom, unfortunately. But so the 5 Safes framework, it was developed initially by the ONS, and this is what we've adapted for use in the Gateway. And the 5 Safes are safe data, so making sure the data are processed in a way that protects any confidentiality concerns. Making sure that the projects that are being carried out on this public data are approved by the data owners and consideration is made of the public good and the public benefit of that project. Considering who's accessing the data, making sure that the people accessing the data are properly trained and authorized in terms of information governance and the use of data. Considering where the data are going to be processed, where they're going to be held. So this would be something like a trusted research environment, for example. And then thinking about the outputs, making sure that they've been screened and that they are non-disclosive in anything and any information that might have been gathered from linking data sets, for example. And so in order to, I wasn't going to do a demo, but I will do a demo at the end of my slides just to show that question in the chat. But what you're going to need to think about before you apply for accessing a data set is thinking about the preparation you need to do. So you need to be able to demonstrate that you're using these data sets for public benefit. And this advice, this is just screenshots from the Gateway. So all of this advice is given in the Gateway, and you can actually select each of those drop sections to get a bit more guidance and information on each of those aspects. But essentially, it's giving you guidance on how to select the data sets you need, thinking about what you call your application, because that's what's going to need to go forward. So what's the name of your research? Consider how you invite other co-applicants perhaps, or contributors to your study. Make sure you've read the advice given to you by the data custodian. We always recommend communicating with that informal inquiry with the data custodian prior to completing any formal data access request, and then checking ahead of time again what approvals you might need. Have you got all your ethics approvals in place, for example? And then just to have that awareness of what happens after you submit that application. So this is, again, just some screenshots from the Gateway. For each question that appears in the Gateway, the data custodian will have provided some guidance and some guidance that is specific to the way that they work and the information that they want to make sure that you know before applying for accessing the data sets that they control. So it's a very simple thing. Read the guidance that's available to you. Some custodians may well have asked you to supply additional files, and there's a section within the application form again that allows you to upload any additional documents that you've been asked to upload. So make sure that those are included. And then once you've done that, what happens after you've submitted that DOI? So let's open up that black box and unpick it a little bit. So in general, the data governance process, it will vary from custodian to custodian. Some have a data governance committee that is all set, ready to go. In other cases, the committee is kind of created in a bespoke way, depending on the application, depending on the data sets that are being requested. But in general, there will be some kind of evaluation of your data access request. And the people evaluating that request may well be the people who generated that data set in the first place. There may be an additional round of ethics review from the custodians side of thinking about that project that you're proposing. And there may well be a patient or public panel incorporated into that governance process as well. And we're seeing that more and more as we go, as data governance becomes more of a key topic. So the committee will review and discuss your data access requests between them. They may well ask you to provide additional information. They may ask you to revise your formal data access request and then go through another round of review. And then assuming the committee approve your data access request, the data custodian may then carry out additional checks. So just checking on in terms of, do you need to be an accredited researcher for accessing this data set? If you do you have the appropriate accreditation in place? Do you have evidence to show that you've been trained in information governance? Have all of the legal documentations been completed? Once all of that is in place and all ticked off and verified, you'll then be often be given access to those data within that trusted research environment. And for questions on trusted research environments, we're very fortunate to have Sushil on this call, so he'll be happy to answer questions on that. But in general, the custodian will make de-identified data available within that after the data access request has been approved. If you've got any specific tools or software that you need, these should be made available to you within that virtual machine environment. And then you carry out that analysis within that trusted research environment, the virtual machine, and those outputs may well be checked for sensitivity by that data custodian. And we have this green paper that was out in 2020, and I think the white paper is due still later this year, or maybe it's out already, so Sushil will know. For more information on TREs. And I'm going to stop sharing my slides here, but what I will do is I will just quickly show you what it looks like to request data, or to go through the process of completing the DAR. So the first thing, so I've just navigated to the gateway, and I can say, if I wanted to look at this data set, I'll just click on the data set here and click on how to request access. And because I'm not signed in, the first thing it tells me to do is to make an inquiry. In order to make an inquiry, I need to sign in. So there's several options for single sign in here. I'll just sign in with Google, which is what I usually do. And then I can come back to this data set and I can select how to request access. And then again, with this particular custodian, they don't have the 5 saves. So I can click on make an inquiry. And these are the sections that I basically spoke to you about earlier in terms of the kind of information that this custodian requires at this stage. I'll show you the 5 saves form. So this is a test data set that we have just exactly for these demonstrations. So how to request access, and then you can see here there's lots of information. This information shown in this page will be specific to that data custodian that's in governing this data set. So it's important to read through this information. In some cases, it's quite a lot of information, but again, important to read through. There may well be links to other information that you need to read. Once you're happy to start the application, you click on Start Application here. Again, it's just a reminder to make sure you've sent that informal inquiry before you do the formal step. But let's assume we've done that. And then you can see here, we've got the form, and essentially it takes you through the things about, before you begin, and then all of the different aspects to tell us who the people are that are going to access this data, and tell us about the project, etc., etc. And what you will see here is as you click on each question, let let's try this one here. You'll get guidance. So again, the guidance that will appear in this section here will be specific to the data custodian. They will have gone through a process of checking the guidance available for each of these steps and make sure that that guidance is relevant to that use case. So there's lots of help available within the gateway to help you complete your application. Once you've completed all of the sections, and I won't be able to do this because there's lots of mandatory sections I haven't completed yet, but you just click on submit application, and as it's saying, it won't let me do that, but that will basically enable, that will facilitate an email to be sent to the data custodian. You'll also get a copy of your application back to you, and then that formal data application process has begun. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm really happy to take any questions. So, okay, great. So there's lots of questions in both Q&A and the chat. So I'll do the Q&A first. So Amiel, hopefully that's the demo that you wanted to see, and let me know if you need to see any more on that. Oh, I see you've got some questions at the bottom. I'll come to them in just a second. So Andrew asks, I work for a pharmaceutical company, can I become a safe person? I think it depends on the projects that you're wanting to do, and it depends also on the data custodians and the specific data sets you want to access. So some of the data sets are made available for commercial uses. Some data sets are specifically not made available for commercial use. So it very much depends on the data custodian and the data sets you want to access. However, all of that information is included in the descriptive information about each data set on the gateway. So you should be able to find out what data sets you can and can't use as a pharmaceutical researcher. I'm going to ask Sushil to answer the next question about needing to be based in the UK to access a TRE. Yeah, handing over to you, Sushil. Thank you.
So hi, Andrew. Yeah, that's a difficult one to answer because it sort of varies between trust research environments. Most trust research environments would want you to have a collaborator based in the UK. So it doesn't mean that you have to be external. You're part of a research consortium or a project that is based in the UK. You will have access to the data. That being said, there are, as I said, there would be restrictions on some in some data trust research environments where you will have to be physically in the UK to be able to access the data.
Thanks, Sushil. And then we've got a few more questions from Emil. Are there agreed response times with custodians? There's no agreed response times. I think these are some of the standardization or some of the kind of work that HDR UK is doing, certainly within the Alliance. So actually trying to start creating some thoughts on what is an appropriate length of time for a data access request to be considered. And so this is some of the work that is ongoing, and HDR UK is very much part of facilitating. Ballpark figure on how long the entire process from informal request for approval can take. I would say how long is a piece of string. It really depends on the data custodian. It depends on what workflow they have in place. And again, this is what we're seeing with some custodians. The custodian may well be the researcher who's generated the data set. And certainly for those researchers who've worked on COVID data sets, they're still very busy actually generating new data. And so they may have less time available to do the whole data governance process. In some institutes, data governance committees are being set up to actually handle that, to take that load off the researchers, off the data generators. So it really depends on what the setup is. And again, this is one of the pieces of work that HDR UK is doing with the data custodian community to try and start thinking about what data governance should look like and how it can work better, and how to reduce that time it takes between initial inquiry and actual making a decision on the data access request. Does the gateway provide information on fees that may be required to access data sets? I'm going to hand this one over to Alison because she's more familiar with exactly what metadata is available on the gateway.
So, so it was about fees. Well, so some there's a variation actually, and it depends on who it is. So when you look at the information that custodians upload, there are fees applied to some, but you really need to have a look at all the information that's uploaded on the page to do with the data set. Some are free and some are charge fees just to cover the admin costs of getting the fees to you. So it's a mixture, really. It really depends on the custodian.
Yeah, and just to add to Alison's point, so if the data set is research ready, most data custodians don't charge for access. There might be some processing costs in terms of the running the environment, cloud computing costs and that sort of thing. But it really depends on your request. If your request is complex enough, where they have to do complex data linkages, data harmonization, data wrangling to get that data done, some data custodians will charge you for that processing cost. But then once that's done, that data set is, or that asset is now available for others to use, and then sort of the cost of research comes down that way. But yeah, it depends on the complexity of your data access request and the type of processing you want to do. If you come around and say, I want to spin out a 3,000 node cluster to run my image processing algorithm, that'll cost money. Most TREs won't be able to serve that capacity because they have to address other researchers' needs as well. So it really depends on what is the kind of analysis you want to do and what's the complexity of your data request.
Thanks, Sushil and Alison. And then we've got a question saying, I'm interested in performing citizen science. Are any of these data sets open to me? And again, I think it's going to depend on which data sets you want to access. You'd need to look at the terms and conditions. Often the data sets that are listed on the gateway are actually quite sensitive data sets. So which is why they're on the gateway. There's limited, we need to think about who accesses those data sets, make sure they're safe people, safe, that it's a safe project, etc. So I think if you found a data set that's on the gateway that you're interested in for a citizen science project, the first thing would be to make that informal inquiry to the data custodian, and they'd be able to advise you further. Okay, and then I'm just going to the chat. So would we expect HRA approval for all data requests? Again, it depends on the data custodian, and it depends on what the governance agreement has been for the particular data set that you're interested in. So not for, you wouldn't expect it for everything, but it will be needed for some projects and some data sets, absolutely. We've answered the timeframes, I think. And so when requesting data access, do you need to have a funded project already in place? Again, it depends on the custodian. In some cases, yes, especially where if we just think about what Alison and Sushil just said about cost recovery, in some cases there is a cost associated with accessing these data. And so the custodian's going to want to know that you've got the means to, or you've got the funding available to pay for that work that's going to be needed in order to make that data set available to you. So again, best thing to do is make an informal inquiry to the custodian in the first instance, who will then be able to give you more information on the specific data sets you're interested in. And so talking about, do we have access to the forms and what's the process in place to pass ethical approvals? Again, it depends on the custodian, it depends on the data set. So the first point, so the gateways is, you can think of the gateway as a way in which to find and discover that these data sets are available for use. And the first thing to do is send that informal inquiry to the custodians of the data sets that you're interested in to understand exactly what's expected of you. And as I said previously, the best thing to do is make that informal inquiry and make sure that you've thought about all of those things before you go down the formal data application, data access request application, because that will, if you don't have all your ducks in a row, you're going to waste your time, you're going to be wasting your custodian's time. So it just makes sense to make those informal inquiries first. Okay, I think I've answered all the questions, unless Rosie, is there anything else that is still there to answer?
Thanks, Varsha. No, I don't think so, which brings us to the break point. So if we take a 5-minute break and reconvene at 3 o'clock, we'll carry on with the rest of the workshop. So see you back at 3. Welcome back, everyone, for the second part of the workshop. I will now hand over to Sushil for the next talk, but if anyone has any questions on any of the previous talks, do feel free to continue to drop those into the Q&A function, and our speakers will try to address those before the end of the talk. Over to you, Sushil.
Thanks, Rosie. The rest of the talk is much more around what's planned. Let me just bring up my slides again. So share my screen. So yeah, so the next part is slightly more into the weeds a little bit as to the kind of features we're developing in the next few months, but also longer term. And there's more of a dialogue really, and I really appreciate your feedback and also comments around what do you expect us to do in terms of how we can better the user experience, how we can get different types of content, what's relevant to you, what would you want to see if you were doing research, and what do you normally Google for that we can curate together and make that available in a much more curated fashion than Google. I'm not saying we can do something better than Google. What I'm saying is, can we do a much more focused experience for health data research? So it's also important to understand where we came from. Sorry, somebody is calling me. So it's also important to understand where we came from. So as I previously mentioned, we started this work at the height of the pandemic, and despite the pandemic, and actually because of the pandemic, we were able to accelerate some of the work and make that available for the National Core Studies work, but also for COVID-19 data research as well. So a lot of the functionality there around curating content. So datasets is one of our main focuses, but also tools and papers and other entities as things we want to bring in, much more around semantic search and improving the search experience. So that's where we came from. And where we're going is also a longer term journey. Our primary focus in the beginning has been around findability and accessibility. How do we make resources that is previously hidden, and previously when researchers had to go and talk to their mate in another institution to try and access the data or find the data, can we make that open, at least understand what's there? Maybe the quality is bad, and that also gives us an opportunity to improve the quality, and then link up all those resources together to make it discoverable, and then also streamline and harmonize the access request process. The next phase of our work is much more around the type of analytics people would like to do. So Cohort Discovery is one example, federated analytics and other trusted research environment federations are other pieces of work that we're trying to bring forward, and also improve the type of data request process. Can we do something clever around streamlining and semi-automating some of this work? So when we apply for insurance, you have to go to compare the market or something. Other insurance brokers are available, but you fill in these forms and they contact multiple data custodians and you come back with a result. Can you automate those kind of decision-making processes? And again, this is not removing the data access committee per se, but trying to augment them to give them as much information as possible so we can streamline the access request. And then once the access request is improved, how do we make you allow you access the data as seamlessly as possible and as close to the data as possible, so you can undertake your research and as quickly as possible and generate the outputs that's necessary. So at the beginning of our work, we set up a total customer experience. So there's a typical software engineering process where we interview a lot of stakeholders, researchers, data custodians, funders, and other organizations and individuals to understand what are their main pain points. And we sort of categorize all of these pain points together, and we've also started some work. So the green dots that you see there, the things that we've actually worked on. The red dots here, admittedly, are the things that we haven't fully completed this work. And you will see there's a mixture of pieces of work that we've done. So this is one example of how we go about understanding the customer. And I don't mean this as a customer, because it's almost a relationship that we're sort of brokering on your behalf. We're helping researchers connect themselves to data custodians or other researchers to enhance collaboration and undertake their research. So this is one slide, and I'll show you the longer journey for all of this is not starting at just discovery, but again, going into improving the metadata quality, linkage to phenotype libraries and data dictionaries, generating user profiles, dashboards, and so on and so forth, and integration with the wider ecosystem. Can you, if you're setting up your project in IRAS, can we start pulling in IRAS information? If you are sending information about your papers and projects that's stored on the gateway, can we send that to ORCID so we can populate your ORCID profiles? These are all the kinds of system level integrations that we also have planned to do, and these are the things that we're working on. So what we're saying is we're not trying to be the one-stop shop. We're the system integrator to try and pull together lots of pieces of information to make the whole a lot better. And again, a longer journey on how you communicate that to public and patients, make that much more consumable, giving you the right guidance at the right context, so you can make your decision when you form your teams, set up your data access request. How do we manage those team memberships? And can we provision that entire workspace, all the tools, the research reference data, the data dictionaries, directly into the trusted research environment, so you can run your analysis within that environment and come back out with all of the identifiers for the different assets that you created within that environment. And again, one of the concepts we've had for a long time is, when a researcher goes through the access request process, if Domino's can set up a pizza tracker, can we set up a pizza tracker for data access requests? Being able to give you transparency as to what's happening with your access request, what needs to be done and what needs to be provisioned, and make even research a mechanism where we can track what's happening and provide support appropriately, either through the TRE or other advisory committees, and also engage public and patient whilst you're going to take your research. So this is the long journey, and this is sort of a deep dive as to what we're focusing on right now in the next 6 months. So improving the custodian experience is one part of it. So getting more data sets onto the gateway, integration with other systems, so that once you found the data, integrate that into trust research, and so we can seamlessly accelerate your work into the trust research environment. Improve the quality of how you fill in forms. There are lots of forms. We hope the work that we've done so far is better than filling in Word forms and sending that by email. So there's only one form that people can fill in and submit to multiple data custodians. Improving search and discovery is always going to be a business as usual improvement that we need to do, and also improve the site experience. Now, the problem and the struggle we always have within an environment or a portal like this is we're trying to address different concerns for different people. We have to engage public and patients, we have to engage researchers such as yourselves, data custodians, industry users, who all come at the problem from different angles. And how do we harmonize that and get a lowest common denominator portal that works for everyone? Yes, it may not be perfect for one category, but the purpose is served for at least the large majority of the ecosystem stakeholders. Again, this is going into detail about it. So there are still data custodians who still will only accept a Word document. But again, we're taking it on ourselves to say, okay, let's the researcher fill in the form on the gateway, and we'll convert that into Word and send that into Word. That's one example of, it's a means to an end, not the end in itself. So hopefully we'll be able to improve that system as we go forward and do a system-wide benefit as part of that. So researchers will then be able to use a single point at which all of these integrations happen. And DOIs are also coming in the new year as well. We're about to sign a contract with the British Library to mint digital object identifiers for datasets, for tools, for projects. Papers already have them, of course, and anything. So we can build a DOI or PID, person identifier graph for yourself, which you can then export into ORCID or any other resource that you want to promote your work, and also be able to ingest that information so you can build up your profile, so you can give more credibility to the type of research when you request your access to the data. So how can you engage with us? And there are many other opportunities. So this is one of them. We do have a community forum, and this is, again, you can give us feedback, you can tell us what's wrong, what's right, what needs more work, and we're all open ears for all of this. We know we haven't done a great job. We've done a fairly good job, but we need to do better. So this is your opportunity to be able to use the forum to do so. Of course, you can also use the forum to set up your own community, special interest groups on image analytics, federated machine learning, anything that you want to talk about. This is a group for you. I know we're already in a pandemic with Slack channels and everything else, But if you want, it's there and it's available for you to use, and you'll be able to reach a wider audience through this work. And of course, you can add, other opportunities. If you know of a tool or a resource that you think needs to be disseminated to other people, add it to the gateway, and then people can find as another source. One of the good things about adding it to the gateway, already index this information through schema.org into the search engines. So all of these are schema.org compliant, and if you go to Google Dataset search and search for the datasets, we're able to discover it there. We can bring people to the gateway and then finally to the data custodians. But there are also specific engagement opportunities. So user research interviews that is run by the user insights team in HDA UK. There's a gateway user forum led by Elaine Branningen, who's our chief product officer for the gateway. The infrastructure advisory board, if you want to get into the technical aspects of running analysis. So Charles and Tim lead that. The Alliance boards, if you're interested in how the Alliance is set up, if you want to partner up providing data into the data custodians, so Varsha would help you with that. And also the data officers group, who may be interested much more on the metadata, the semantic ontologies and the annotations of the data to improve the semantic linkage of the data. Alison would be able to help you with that. So with that, I will stop my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. I can't see any of the questions, so I'll just stop sharing. Any burning questions? And I'm happy to talk about anything else that was previously spoken as well. I don't see anything in the Q&A or in the chat. Okay, hopefully we've answered most of your questions, but feel free to drop us an email or do you have cancer data sets? Yes, so you search for cancer, you'll be able to find some data sets. I could do that live, but you could attempt to do that on the gateway as well. We do also have a curated cancer collection from one of our hubs, which is DataCan, and DataCan would also have a huge array of assets and resources that you can find. So maybe the other thing, I know some of you are affiliate members of HDA UK as well. So HDA UK is set up as part, the Alliance has a group of data custodians, but also we also fund hubs, which are essentially collaboration between academia, healthcare, and industry to bring them together to make data available for thematic areas. So DataCan is our cancer hub. We have one on respiratory disease on the Breathe hub, Insight, which is ophthalmology, and others, so DataMind, mental health. So there are these research thematic hubs that is enabled to provide access to tools, papers, data sets, and also are part of the Alliance and add those resources into the gateway. So definitely it's worth searching a curated collection like DataCan, but also searching in general on the gateway. So Rob has asked, have you considered including tools for estimating bias due to patterns in the missing data in the metadata? No, that's a great question, and we haven't. And so the one thing we need to be very clear is HDA UK itself doesn't hold access to data. Now, I know the question is around missing data in the metadata itself. We are only starting the process of collecting that metadata, so we don't have yet a critical mass. So I think we have technical metadata of around 40%, 40 to 50%. So yeah, we're not there yet, but it's a great question, something that the applied analytics community would be able to help with. So if there's a tool that you're already aware of, or that it's some work that you've already done in another project or elsewhere, please reach out to us, and we'll be able to include that tool and improve the quality of the metadata as well. But yeah, it's not something that we've actively considered. Thank you, Lucy, for sharing the Health Data Research Hubs link.
Thanks very much, Sushil. Are there any final questions to come through before we wrap up? Oh, I think we've got a couple more in the Q&A, Sushil.
Oh, sorry, I didn't notice that.
It just come through this second.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. So what course do I need to take to be a safe person? Well, So I'm not going to give a politician's answer of it depends. So there are a few courses that's also registered on the Gateway and also in the VLE HDA UK Futures. So these are courses administered by ADA UK, the Office of National Statistics, which are the accredited researcher programs, also by other TREs as well. So MRC runs them, UKRI runs them, the Sale Data Bank in Wales also runs them. Again, the requirements are you have to undertake an information governance course on handling sensitive data and pass a very simple test around it. There might be other requirements. There's some, if you're dealing with administrative data, you need to have a degree, so a maths or stats degree, because one of the questions around statistical disclosure control is understanding how you go about it. And it's not the perfection is not the goal. It's safety. That's the goal. So are you able to work through those problems and be able to undertake that work? So I had to redo mine this year. But the accreditation lasts for 3 months. But it's not just enough to be a safe person. It's not really a title or a degree you would get. It's more about are you aware of all the inconsistencies of the data and are you able to handle the data? That's one part. The other part is the project that you're doing for the public benefit? And if it is, the combination of having an accredited researcher and an accredited project or some project that's gone through a data access committee for approval would put you in a better place to be able to get access to the data and perform your analysis. So those courses are also listed on the Gateway as well, and also in the guidance as part of the data sets as well as to what courses they would recommend each data custodian has. We don't have a national single course to do purely because of the fragmented nature in all 4 nations, but we're getting that. We're slowly building up the capacity and the coordination to be able to get some of these courses accepted widely. So one of the work that we've done is to try and get the DEA accredited researcher program run by the Office of National Statistics and the UK Stats Agency, Stats Authority, sorry, is accepted widely in all 4 nations and all 5 of the big national TREs. The next question is from Nigel. Are there any existing data sets with linked tissue and imaging data for brain tumors? It's a good question, not my domain of expertise. My domain is cardiac electrophysiology, but have a search would be the answer I would give. So search for cancer and imaging data. We don't yet have a lot of imaging data, I have to admit. I think there are a few, but that's something that's actively being worked on. But of course, have a reach out to the brain tumor charity, and also which will also have data sets on the Gateway, and DataCan as well, who would be able to help you. At least shepherd you. If the data set does not exist, they will know of which data set that's available for you to access. Another one from Andrew. So are there any areas on HDA UK Gateway website that contain case studies and example access request forms? I'll take the first one and the second one separately. So the last one is easier to answer. We don't have access request forms. And the reason for that is not because we don't want to, but is because we don't want to lead the witness. Giving access, example access request forms, so typically we've seen that before, and data custodians also don't like it, is having those access requests, and people would tend to copy paste, the ethical statement or the impact statement will just be a copy paste from the original, and that will lead to spurious results. The access request forms are not a mechanism to pass a test. It's about, have you thought about the problem and how you're attempting to address the problem. That is the need for that form, not really to pass the test. So we've shied away from providing example access request forms, but of course the guidance is there. There are some, so IRAS for example has example forms, but again there's a caveat and a disclaimer there that these are just for information purposes, not to be reused, and hence we've shied away from that. In terms of case studies, that's a good question. We are building up those case studies. We've only recently started that this summer as part of the National Course Studies work and other work that we're performing, and those will be on our website soon. There's another piece of work around public and patient reviews of data sets and data access requests. So those are also case studies around how the public and patient's perception of research projects also come into account. So there's a combination of those two things that is about to be loaded onto the gateway soon. I think that's coming in the new year. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thanks, Sushil. That looks like the last of the questions. So thanks very much indeed for speaking today. I just have a little bit more information that I'd like to run through before we wrap up, just very briefly. So first of all, is just to let you all know about HDR UK Futures, which is our virtual learning environment. It's completely free to access and hosts a growing catalogue of online learning content, including lots of bite-sized videos, for example, and registered users are growing all the time. It also has an events calendar where you can keep up to date with HDR UK events, as well as the events of our partners. So thanks very much, everybody, for attending the workshop today. I hope you found it useful and informative. And I'd also like to thank all of the speakers again for taking the time to talk to us today. One final thing I'd like to let you know is we'd really appreciate your feedback on this webinar. So we'll be circulating a survey via email after the event. Thanks very much.